Hey, what's up? It's Nathan here, and today I want to show you how you can use multiband distortion on drums to begin to shape your drums. Now, the reason this is a really valuable technique is because, when it comes to EQ, you're really only able to change the tonal balance of what's already there in a drum sample or a synth drum sample. And so there's limitations because, oftentimes, especially with bassism, the top end in bassism isn't very hyped. You can't really get as sharp of a top end, and sometimes samples have the same problem as well. So what you can do, a really cool technique that you can use to give your drum more snap, is you can just take a multiband distortion unit like Mul. I prefer Combinat because Mul has filters which are not phase linked. So Trash, Isotope Trash, Combinat, Homicide, those would be ideal multiband distortion units to use for the task of reshaping your drums with distortion. So really, it's gonna be a pretty short tutorial because my favorite thing to use this for is to just hype the top end to give the drum more snap. So let's play the drum that we have right now, and then I'll show you how we're gonna kind of liven it up, give it more kind of punch. That's a boring drum. It's really basic. It's actually very nice and clean, but that's not gonna do much for you if you have a pretty dense mix. It's not gonna cut through. It could work in a warmer, kind of more low-key mix, but in a lot of trance or house or any of those EDM genres that are pretty cool, you kind of want a pretty hyped top end on that kick. And a really easy way to do it is watch what happens if I take this saturate just on the top end around 2K, 3K plus, and just begin to saturate the top end of that kick. Watch what happens. It's really, really cool. We need to enable it. So already right there, we've added to it. If I A-B this, it's going to be really cool. Boom, just like that. You've gotten that nice 808 snap, very clean. It maintains the kind of cleanliness of your synth patch. If you're using a synth kick, it's great for that. And then if you wanted to like distort the low end of your kick, it's a lot better to do it with a multi-band unit than to do it with just a single band distortion. It's going to affect the whole sound and doesn't give you as much control. So if you wanted to distort that low end, like for example, if you're going for like a punchy kick where we high passed it, that's where that kind of distortion would be pretty useful. Let's say we high pass it about 50, removing a lot of that low end before it goes into Combinat, we'd get this. So we'll put it at 70 to make it more dramatic. Now, it's really fun to cut that out and then just distort what you have left, because there's some neat things that happen. So we'll use saturate as an example. Now, there's a lot of Vengeance samples that have this thing going on in there. And it's an overlooked technique. I for the longest time, I didn't do this very much. It was only until recently that I caught myself doing it, and I was like, whoa, yeah, I used to do this, and it was really, really cool. I should do it again, because I saw myself do it in a video. Anyway, so what I would do at this point is, once we've got it pretty hyped with that saturation, there's still too much low end, so I'd actually turn this cutoff a little bit sharper and see what we get. And it's really cool to do that kind of saturation on a kick drum that's more clicky and less subby, because you can get away with some really, really aggressive high passing on that kick drum, and it actually won't have much sub left, but it'll sort of sound like there's sub in there, and that's what the distortion is doing. It's a really cool effect. Let's see how high we can go with the 12 dB per octave filter. It's really fun doing this for me. So let's just play with that. Leave it there. We'll go back to our synth sample, see if we can shorten it a little bit, because saturating the low end increases the duration of the tail of your kick, and that's only because it makes it louder. So the stuff that you didn't hear before in the tail is now been boosted, so it sounds as if it's lasting longer, when really before you just weren't hearing it because it wasn't playing very loud. Cool. That's good. I like that. And then if you wanted to, if you wanted a little bit more control, you could follow the distortion up with a post EQ just to clean up that low end a little more, because again, we are distorting it. Even though we have an EQ before it cutting, it's going to still add more low frequency content. So we can clean that up again by just high passing it at about 50, maybe 80 hertz. We'll see. That's pretty cool. So with this particular drum, with the middle band, what's really cool about multi-band distortion units is you can use them as EQs as well. You don't have to pop an EQ on there. I don't like the mid-range on this drum. I don't need it. It's not useful to me. Let's just take some of that away. And then maybe we can saturate the mid-range with just something weird, see what happens. Doesn't really work. I'm not the biggest fan of actually doing any kind of treatment to the mid-range of a kick, which is basically from about 200 hertz to 1K, 2K, maybe 3K in this case. And so once I've done this kind of treatment, I do like to limit my kicks. I typically don't do this until I'm finalizing my mix, because I like to use invisible limiter, and because it adds, some delay to my track. What I use invisible limiter to do is I'm just using it as a clipper, so it clips off that top end. So we can visualize it if we look over at Fab Filter on my master, which is going to show us the initial level of this kick. That's really high because I mix with the kick hitting anywhere between negative 8 dB and negative 6 dB, sometimes even negative 10 dB, because I like to have a lot of headroom. For me, that's very important, just because, not because the headroom does anything. Well, it sort of does something, but you just need that space to mix into. And if you use it all up, you're going to have a terrible mix down experience. It's going to be horrible. Just anywhere between negative 10 and 6 is a good place. So what I like to do with invisible limiter is I use it as a clipper to clip off that kind of top peak, to shave it off. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see that this kick was hitting wherever it was hitting before, which is at like negative 4 dB. And it's going to probably drop down to about negative 6 dB, maybe 8 if I can get some pretty good clipping on there. And here's the thing about clipping, because clipping is a sacrifice. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of the original tone of that kick so that it takes up less peak volume in your track, which is going to allow you to do better limiting. Because if your kick hits your limiter like 4 dB before anything else ever hits your limiter, you're going to have some major problems when you get to the mastering stage of your track, because you want everything to hit your limiter at about the same time. That's usually an indication of a track that is well mixed. Actually, no, it's a track that was engineered so that it could be mixed for loudness. Is a track where everything is going to hit the limiter at the same time. So let's clip this drum. I like to use invisible limiter on unity gain monitoring because I can just turn it all the way up. It's not going to change the volume at all. Love that feature. And what's really cool about limiting is if you have some sub in your sound and you felt like you cleaned it up a lot, you can just remove the sub, because the more limiting that you add, the more the sub's going to be removed from the sound. That's just what it does. That's pretty substantial. I mean, that's some pretty significant limiting. And if you look what we've done here, if we disable this limiter, you're going to see it goes back up to negative 4, negative 2, and then it comes back down to negative 6. Once we turn that back on, you'll see that it drops in volume. And that's really, really cool, because if you stop and think about it for a moment, when you're shaving off that much volume, it gives you more headroom. So it's a great way to do that. And all you really have to do is just slap any kind of limiter on there. You can do it with invisible limiter. You can do it with whatever limiter you have. I use T-Rack's CS Clipper all the time for that same effect, as well as the L1 limiter from Waves. and FabFilter. I just use whatever I feel like, but Invisible Limiter tends to be the cleanest. So, you know, that brings us to the end of our tutorial. If you find that useful, give me a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, then leave a comment letting me know what I did horribly or what I did great. And hit that subscribe button if you find these videos useful. And we'll see you next time.